Welcome to Bealtaine Cottage. Jack, are you going to say hello? Come on. One of the things that sort of intrigues me, you know, when I look at other gardening sites on YouTube, whether they be allotment sites or garden sites, there's an awful lot of buying of new stuff. There's a lot of buying of pots. And I can only refer back to the very early days of the Bealtaine Project, when I had literally just enough money to cover my mortgage each month. I had no money for pots or plants or anything, so I had to be quite creative, shall we say. Now, one of the things that I did, I went to my local garden centre, before I even became a customer really, you know. I went to my local garden centre that also did landscaping, and I asked them, do they have any pots that they were throwing out? And they showed me around the back, and absolutely masses of pots, masses of them. And I think that they all go to a recycling centre, to be fair, you know. I'm not saying that the garden centres throw them away. I think that most of them go to the recycling. They may have to pay to recycle them, I don't know. But, you know, case in point, I went down to my local garden centre again today because I had to get some compost. And what I needed was some pots to pot on some of my little seedling trees. But I also needed some pots to cut the bottoms out of to use over in my new vegetable bed, because you know, for year one I'm using bottomless pots a fair bit because of the shallow depth of the compost and the fact that I have a cotton, well, 2 cotton curtains as a membrane, and I don't want to cut through them. I want to keep that membrane secure for a couple of years. It will rot eventually, of course, for a couple of years, just to suppress those really persistent plants that I don't want, i.e. meadowsweet and some raspberry canes. I planted raspberry, I shouldn't have. Anyway, hey ho, load of pots. I'm a very happy woman because I can now carry on with my planting out on my vegetable garden. So, absolutely free. It's amazing what you can forage for free. You know, it really is amazing. And there's another place where you can go and forage for free. Let me tell you about that. So again, when it comes to foraging, never be afraid to ask. I got this fish box in the market from a fishmonger who was tidying up at the end of the day, and these were boxes that he threw away, quite frankly. And I asked him, could I have a couple, and he said, absolutely, sure. And they've been the most brilliant boxes for growing on seedlings and plants, and of course my very famous cut and come again, or microgreens as you like to call them, except that I just use any seed that sprouts green that's edible. Free. Tyres. Free. Mostly shipped off to the third world. Because you know us in the West, we don't like to own our own waste. But anyway, I've taken lots of tyres over the years, and these two have been used for planting my very famous rose. Look, roses love to have warm feet. So tyres, being black, attract the heat of the sun and hold the heat of the sun. They're great insulators. And again, they're free. Continuing on the foraging theme, there's another way to do it. Many people ask me what this beautiful plant is, and I tell them it's euphorbia. I can't say more than that, because this is a plant that I got through helping someone do their garden. When I think the first couple of years that I was here, I got to know various people, you know, through the library and stuff like that in town. And one of the people that I got to know was an older lady who had a fairly big garden and she needed some help. And we got chatting, you know. And I said, oh, I'd be happy to come round and give you a hand. Yeah, she made me dinner and everything. It was really nice of her, you know. But I spent, I suppose, about 4 or 5 hours round in her garden. And she was, you know, she was an avid gardener. She was dividing up plants and you know, she said, oh, that can go. And I was literally filling a trailer. Now, I had a trailer at the time because one of the things that I thought was going to be very useful for me was an old banger of a car and a trailer. And I got that in the very early days. So I was putting all this stuff that she didn't want into the trailer because I thought, okay, I can start my compost heap with this, you see. Because I said that I would take all the cuttings and all the dead stuff away. Well, she had some beautiful logs there from a tree that was felled some time before. I got those. They helped me to make raised beds. This is some of the beautiful euphorbia from her garden. I remember that day I came home and I literally kind of sat it on top of the soil, put some compost around it and just let it go. And it's been coming up every year, and I've since taken cuttings off it down near the old silt pond. Fuchsia, masses of fuchsia cuttings. I think the very first ribes cuttings I got there. There were so many plants that I got that helped me get this garden established. It was amazing, and it was all through just offering my services free, you know. It was something which I've always practiced. I've always practiced, you know, just being a decent person wherever possible, you know. And I've always had great rewards for it, so can't go wrong. I'll just show you some of the logs that they're still here. These are some of the huge logs. Now, not that one there, not that little one, but these ones. Look, and you can see now they're almost soil. In fact, they're making soil now. Well, there you go. Stones and bogwood. I've dug all these stones out of the soil here because Roscommon is famous for stony soil, as is most of the west of Ireland really. And on the top is a piece of bog oak. So look, stones and old wood go together beautifully. I couldn't resist then putting some heathers in behind it, and some rhododendron, which flowers in the spring, on top of that. So, a free raised bed. Look how beautiful it is. With some free valerian growing on the outside of the stones, because they love stony soil, they love limestone. Steps made using some stones that I dug up, and some cement that I made up. Stand the stones in front, put some stones and cement in behind, and voila. Virtually free. You've got to buy the cement. That's an old tin bread bin that the bottom fell out of. Makes a great planter. Just put straight on top of the gravel and filled with lots of compost, free, and compost, free, and then some cuttings of honeysuckle. And before you know it, you've got this. And growing all the way around the side. Can't be bad, can it? I've even got some tires around the back of the she shed, because again they make great planters for things like bay trees, rosemary, roses, hebes, virtually anything. Oh, talking of tires and planters, I've got my clematis growing out of those 2 tires. Look at that. So you don't really need to go spending money to have a beautiful garden. Or even if you've got poor soil. There's nothing going to wash out of those tires. You can't afford a bench. this is what you do. So I had lots of bits of old wood that I picked up from building sites, and you can see how I've made the legs of this bench. The top of the bench is a piece of a sleeper, and the legs have been made from cutting up, sawing up a stack of wood all the same size and then nailing each one on top of the other. That bench has been there for years. It's going nowhere. So you want to make a little flower bed and you've got no materials. Well, you could just lay down pieces of wood interspersed with pieces of stone, interspersed with the odd pot, and sometimes 2 pieces of wood, like 2 logs that you've cut up here. All it's there for is to hold the earth in place. And once the plants get embedded into that earth, the earth isn't going anywhere. It's going to stay put. Look, I've even got an old piece of a castle window in there. Look at that. That's from an old castle. This is some of my beautiful sedums, planted into an old tin. I think this was a Tate & Lyle syrup tin, and placed upon an old stand that again was foraged. And if you put them in a fairly dry spot, they just thrive. Look how elegant that looks. Well, frugal gardening, I've got to include the window boxes, because both the window boxes were made by myself out of some wood that was in the barn. Nothing specific, just it was one big long plank of wood, and I decided to make 3 window boxes out of it for the 3 windows at the front of the cottage. So in terms of cost, the wood was there. I made the window boxes, so I suppose the cost is 0. And yes, I painted them with garden paint, but that was already there in the barn. So, very frugal. More frugal gardening. An arch made out of wood that was lying around. These are just bits of wood that I coppiced. Oh look, there's a little clematis flower beginning to come out there. So just coppice wood, stuck straight into the ground on either side, and some of it's rooted. So the ribes here are rooted, so I'm going to be winding that up through the whole setup just to stabilise it. Cost, 0. Maybe I should call this video Zero Cost Gardening. I don't know. Oh, it's got honeysuckle on it and clematis, and now by default ribes as well. Look. And there's some Chinese forget-me-not. Right, come on Jack, let's show the folks some more frugal gardening. Because I've got to add in the rustic arch that I made. Again, which costs me 0. So all of this wood, bar the top bit, which I found on the beach, all of this wood was coppiced here. So I grew it, coppiced it, and made the rustic arch. Well, I would like to say the cost was 0, but I did pay a huge amount of money for the string. Yes, for some reason or other, string has gone up in price. But I suppose I could have actually used other materials if I hadn't have had the money for the string. So you could say 0, yeah. Frugal gardening, another arch, cost 0. It was 2 pieces of laurel that I stuck in, one either side of the path, and I grew the laurel on as bushes and let them grow high enough, and then I started to tie them in over the top of my head. And after a few years, beautiful laurel arch. You know, laurel is a fantastic plant to use if you want to do any kind of gardening that involves creating structures in the garden. Laurel is brilliant. Well, the stone circle here at the very top of the garden on the wild edge, this was constructed by myself with a little help from my brother Hugh, who brought in some of the bigger stones from the bank up there. And this is a 13 stone circle. And of course the stones were here. So again, use natural materials which are close to hand. And if you're lucky enough to have stones, and these are quite ancient stones. I say ancient because some of them have been worked that were there in the bank. And where I've taken them out, of course, has made room now for these beautiful ferns. So yes, you could say cost zero. Sound of the wood pigeons, beautiful. My little oak, look at that. Hedges in your garden shouldn't cost you anything at all. If you have access to cuttings, so from a neighbour or a friend, or if you go out walking, you can get cuttings. These are cuttings of spirea, and they're just put straight into the earth here, and they've made this beautiful hedge. And if I walk down further, there's some beautiful box, look, which again, this has cost me nothing at all. So the ultimate in frugal gardening, just put the cuttings straight into the earth, and as they start to grow, start clipping them and allowing them to thicken up, and before you know it, you have a hedge, and that costs you zero. I often wonder why people go out buying hedging plants. Buying one or two is okay, because then you can take cuttings from them, but to buy masses to put a hedge in seems to be ridiculous. You can see from this little one that I just started last year how it begins to grow. You can see just the single cuttings I've put in all the way along here, and I'm going to be giving those their first cut in the next week or two, and then that starts to thicken them up. Also, just take you through here, there is the famous willow arches. Now in the early days I made loads of willow arches here in the garden, and I also made willow fencing. So it's a living fence, it's called a fedge, and you can see, very simple to do. If you want to know how to do it, go onto the website or just type in willow arch, Bealtaine Cottage, and there'll be lots and lots of informative material will come up on your search engine. Free. Frugal, free. Also, this little kind of wattle fencing, which is made with willow and dogwood, with a beech along the bottom, because you don't want the willow too close to the soil because it'll root. And it did cost a little bit because I used fencing posts cut down into 3. So each fencing post, which was €2 to buy, cut down into 3 bits. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, I think there's about 5 fencing posts in there. So yeah, I suppose the total would have been about €10. Now this is a lovely old copper bowl, and it's sat back on a chair, an iron chair, garden chair. The chair was going to be thrown out because it's only got 3 legs. One of the legs is broken away, so it's sort of balanced there, and of course with the little bird bath sitting on the top, or the little bird drinker sitting on the top, no one's going to try and sit down in it. I hope not, in a way. So again, it's about repurposing things and making the most of what you have and being creative with all the bits and bobs that you already have in and around your home, or which you can find sometimes just people throw out as junk, or as I said earlier, recycling centres. Go there and watch what people are taking out of their cars. And if you see something that's going to be useful or interesting, step forward and say, I'd really like to have that. Would you mind if you gave that to me? And most people say, yeah, sure. I mean, what would you say? Now, last but not least, because I need to wrap up this video, but there's lots and lots more to show you, of course, which I will do in other videos. Last but not least, the ferns. Remember I had a pot of ferns? It started off as one small fern in a pot, which I collected from a woodland. I grew it on in a pot, and then it looked very nice where it was, so I left it for several years, and the pot became totally overgrown with ferns, and I had to literally take an axe to take the ferns apart. But from that one pot, I got 11 pots of ferns. Look, so they're all here, and some of the pots have got more than one. They've got several coming up in them, and these are the rest of them here. So I've got 11 beautiful ferns now to plant out in my garden. So how simple is that? So Tuesday evening, I'm going to say blessings to you all, and I'm going to go indoors and upload this video before I settle down for the evening. I think it must be getting on for about 8 o'clock. Maybe it's later. So it's quite close to my bedtime. I like to go to bed when the sun goes down, especially at this time of the year, because it's absolutely beautiful to get up early in the morning, get up about 6 or 7 and just welcome that day in. Blessings. You can support Bealtaine Cottage and the work I do across social media by buying any one of my books. That's the first one, A Cottage in 3 Acres. That tells the story of how Bealtaine Cottage came into being. There are books, maps, a calendar printed each year, and bumper stickers, and the link to purchasing any of these can be found below every video. All are printed here in Ireland in my local town, and all are posted from Ireland in my local post office.